The morning Kade Voss realized his bodyguard had never once spoken aloud was the morning he found a dead man's knife embedded in his doorframe, and her standing beside it with blood on her knuckles, and that same unreadable expression she wore whether she was sharpening her blade or pouring his coffee. He stood in the doorway of his mill house, the river roaring below the wheel, and stared at the knife. It was a cruel thing, the sort with a narrow point meant for slipping between ribs. His bodyguard, Renna Darrow, stood with her arms crossed, green skin catching the early light, her dark hair pulled back in its usual braid. She was lean and quick-looking, built like a runner or a dancer, and she met his gaze with those amber eyes that never seemed to blink at the right times. "Well," Kade said, because someone had to fill the silence, "I suppose that is one way to start the day." Renna pulled a small slate from her belt and wrote in quick, efficient strokes. "Tried window first. I convinced him otherwise." Kade leaned closer to read the chalk marks. They had developed a sort of shorthand over the past 3 weeks, since the magistrate had assigned her to him. He was the only witness willing to testify that Baron Torrance had known about the dam's cracked foundation before the collapse. 3 farms drowned. 7 people dead, including 2 children. The autumn assizes were 6 weeks away, and apparently someone thought a knife in the night might change his mind. "You hurt?" Kade asked. She shook her head. "Him, gone. Dead gone or running gone. Running, for now." Kade scrubbed a hand over his face. He was 32, built solid from years of working the mill machinery, with brown hair that never quite laid flat and a beard he kept trimmed short. His hands were always stained with grease and sawdust, and his back carried the sort of ache that came from honest work. He had never expected to be at the center of anything important. He just happened to be delivering grain sacks to the dam site the day before it failed, and he had overheard the Baron's engineer begging for 3 more days to shore up the southern wall. "I should make coffee," Kade said. "You want coffee?" Renna tilted her head slightly. It was her version of a shrug. He took that as a yes. It was remarkable, really, how much she could communicate without words. In the 3 weeks she had been shadowing him, he had learned to read the minute shifts in her posture, the angle of her ears, the way her hand would drift toward her sword when something was not quite right. Inside, the mill house was small and practical. 1 main room with a kitchen area, a table, a fireplace, a bedroom barely large enough for a bed, a loft where Renna slept, though he suspected she did not sleep much. He had started making 2 portions of everything without thinking about it. This morning he made porridge with honey and cinnamon, the way his mother had taught him, and set a bowl in front of the chair Renna always took. She ate neatly, efficiently, and he watched her over the rim of his mug. "You know, most people I have hired for things at least tell me their rates first," he said. "We have been living together for nearly a month, and I still do not know if you prefer beans or bacon." Renna looked up, wrote on the slate, "Contract paid by magistrate." "That is not what I asked." "Both," Kade laughed. It startled her, he could tell, because her ears twitched back for just a moment. Beans and bacon, a woman of expensive tastes. She almost smiled. He had only seen her almost smile twice before. Once when he had tripped over his own bootlace and nearly fallen into the mill race, and once when a rooster had chased him across the yard because he forgot to bring scraps. They fell into their routine. Kade worked the mill, grinding grain for the local farmers, maintaining the wheel, fixing the endless small problems that came with running water-powered machinery. Renna followed him like a shadow. When he climbed onto the wheel housing to check the paddles, she stood below with one hand on her sword. When he went into the village for supplies, she walked 3 paces behind and to his left, positioned so she could see both him and anyone approaching. The village of Crossing Ford was small, maybe 200 people, clustered where the King's Road met the Silverun River. Most folks knew Kade. His father had built the mill, and Kade had inherited it when fever took both his parents 5 years back. People nodded to him, waved, asked about their orders. They stared at Renna. He could see it in their faces. The way their eyes would track to her tusks, small and curved, barely visible when her mouth was closed. The way they would step slightly aside, giving her more room than necessary. Orcs were not common this far south. Most worked as mercenaries or soldiers on the northern borders where the wars were. Some folks in Crossing Ford had never seen one up close. "Morning, Kade," old Marcus called from his vegetable stall. "That creature still following you around?" "Her name is Renna," Kade said mildly. "And yes, someone tried to stick a knife in me this morning, so I am grateful for it." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "What? You heard me. Tell everyone. Baron Torrance is getting nervous, seems like." By the time they returned to the mill, Kade's arms were full of supplies and his mind was full of worries. He set the sacks down inside and turned to find Renna watching him with that steady, measuring look. "What?" he asked. She wrote. "You told them." "About the knife. Course I did." "Let them chew on that for a while. Maybe it will remind a few people why I am doing this. Dangerous. Everything's dangerous right now." He started unpacking the flour, the salt, the beans. Might as well be dangerous in a way that helps. Renna moved to help, her hands quick and sure. They worked in companionable silence for a while, and Kade found himself thinking about how strange this all was. A month ago he had been alone, just him and the river and the endless work. Now there was this quiet, fierce woman in his space, and somehow it did not feel like an intrusion. It felt like something settling into place. That night he made stew. Renna sat at the table cleaning her weapons, a process she undertook with the sort of reverence some people reserved for prayer. Her sword was a beautiful thing, curved slightly, with a wrapped handle worn smooth from use. She also carried 3 knives that he knew about and probably more that he did not. "Can I ask you something?" Kade said, stirring the pot. She glanced up. The silence. "Is it a religious thing, or did something happen?" Renna's expression did not change, but she set down the oilcloth and reached for her slate. "Lodge code. Words breed attachment. Attachment gets clients killed." Kade read it twice. "Your mercenary company makes you stay silent," she nodded. "That seems, I do not know, harsh. Effective." He ladled stew into bowls and brought them to the table. "What if you need to warn someone? Yell for help." Renna tapped the slate, then she made a series of hand signs, quick and fluid. "Stop, danger, run, come, wait." He had learned maybe a dozen of them so far, enough to get by. "Still," Kade said, "must get lonely." She looked at him for a long moment and he thought maybe he had overstepped. But then she picked up her spoon and ate, and the moment passed. The days folded into each other. Kade taught her more signs, ones he made up. "This grain is moldy. The wheel bearing needs grease. I am going to fall into the river if you keep laughing at me." She taught him to read her shorthand, the way she abbreviated words on the slate, the little symbols she used for common ideas. They developed a language that belonged only to them. He learned that she liked honey in her tea but not sugar, that she could catch a mouse mid-run without looking like she was trying, that she was left-handed but fought equally well with either, that she slept with her sword in arm's reach and woke at sounds he could not hear. She learned that he talked when he was nervous or thinking, filling the air with chatter, that he had a scar on his right forearm from a mill accident when he was 17, that he sang while he worked, old river songs his father had taught him, that he could not carry a tune to save his life but sang anyway. 4 weeks after she arrived, Kade came down from the loft storage to find Renna standing utterly still in the middle of the room, her head cocked, listening. He froze. Signed. What? She held up one finger. Wait. They stayed like that for a count of 30, and then Renna moved fast as a striking snake to the window. She looked out, scanned the tree line, then turned back and signed. Horses. 3. Watching. You can hear horses from inside with the river running, Kade asked. She just looked at him. Right. Orc hearing. He kept forgetting. What do you want to do? She wrote. Well, I need to fix the grain hopper, so I suppose I am going to do that, and you are going to do what you do. The corner of her mouth twitched, definitely almost a smile. She vanished outside like smoke, and Kade went to work on the hopper. It was a finicky piece of equipment, always getting jammed. He was elbow deep in the mechanism when he heard shouting. He grabbed a wrench, more out of instinct than any real plan, and ran outside. 3 men on horses were in his yard. One of them was on the ground, clutching his arm. Another was trying to control his spooked mount. The third had his hands up in surrender, because Renna had an arrow knocked and drawn, aimed at his chest, and her expression suggested she would not mind loosing it. Gentlemen, Kade called, you are on private land. The one with his hands up, older and better dressed than the others, turned his head carefully. Mr. Voss, we just came to talk. People who just want to talk usually knock on the door. Your guard is a mite quick with the violence. Kade looked at the man on the ground. You bleeding? She broke my damned arm. Then you should not have drawn on her. Renna, did he draw first? She nodded, the arrow still trained on the older man. There you have it, Kade said cheerfully. Self-defense. Now state your business or get off my land. The older man cleared his throat. Baron Torrance sends his regards. He wanted me to convey that he understands you have been under considerable strain, and he would like to offer you compensation for your time. A generous sum, to be clear. Enough to rebuild your mill somewhere else, perhaps. Start fresh. A bribe, you mean? A gesture of goodwill. Tell the Baron he can take his goodwill and shove it up his Mr. Voss. The man's voice went hard. You are making a mistake. The Baron is a powerful man. He has friends, allies. You are alone out here. Kade felt something hot and bright flare in his chest. I am not alone. Renna shifted her stance slightly. The arrow did not waver. The man seemed to understand he would get nowhere. He gathered his reins, gesturing for the other mounted man to help the one on the ground. Think about it, Voss. You have time, but not much. They left, the one with the broken arm swearing creatively the whole way. Kade waited until they were out of sight, then sat down hard on the chopping stump. His hands were shaking. Renna lowered the bow and moved to stand in front of him, her eyes scanning his face. I am fine, he said. Just that was, I suppose it was bound to happen. She knelt so they were eye level. Up close, he could see the pattern of darker green freckles across her nose and cheeks. Her eyes were more gold than amber in the direct light. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and rested one hand on his shoulder. The touch was warm, solid, real. Thank you, Kade said quietly, for being here. I meant what I said. I am not alone. Renna's expression softened. She squeezed his shoulder once, then stood and offered him a hand up. They went inside and did not speak of it again that day. But that night Kade made roast chicken with potatoes and carrots, the kind of meal that took hours and filled the house with good smells. Renna helped, chopping vegetables with the same precise efficiency she brought to everything. He found himself watching her, the way she moved, the way her hands looked holding a paring knife. You know what is strange, he said. I've gotten so used to the quiet that when other people talk now, it feels like too much noise. Renna glanced at him, curious. Like in the village. Everyone wants to chatter about nothing. The weather, the harvest, whatever gossip is making the rounds. And all I can think is that I would rather be here with you, where it is quiet and I can actually think. She set down the knife and wrote, You talk all the time. Kade laughed. That is different. I am not expecting you to answer. It is just, I do not know, comfortable, like thinking out loud. I listen. I know you do. He checked the chicken, turning it so it would brown evenly. That is the thing. You listen more than anyone I have ever met. Most people are just waiting for their turn to talk. You actually hear what I say. Renna looked at him for a long moment, and he wondered what she was thinking. But she just picked up the knife and went back to the carrots, and the moment passed into evening. The next week brought rain, cold and relentless. The river rose, turning brown and furious. Kade could not work the wheel when the water ran that high, so he spent his time inside, repairing tools, oiling leather, doing the 100 small tasks that kept a mill running. Renna checked the perimeter every few hours, coming back soaked, her dark hair plastered to her skull. You are going to freeze, Kade said, handing her a towel. At least wear the oilcloth coat. She shook her head, water flying. Why not? Slows movement. What good is fast movement if you catch lung fever? She gave him a look that clearly said he was being ridiculous, but the next time she went out, she wore the coat. They fell into a new rhythm, confined by the weather. Kade taught her to play cards, a simple game called Kings and Fools. She beat him 6 hands out of 10, and he suspected she was counting. She taught him more hand signs, combat signals used by her lodge: enemy, flank, retreat, hold. You miss it? Kade asked one evening, the rain drumming on the roof. The lodge, being with your own people. Renna was still for a moment, then wrote, sometimes. What made you leave? Or not leave but take contracts elsewhere? Money, experience. Lodge members are expected to travel. Will you go back? After this is done, she looked at him, her face unreadable. Yes. Something twisted in Kade's chest. Of course she would go back. This was a job, a contract. He was a client, nothing more. The fact that he had started thinking of her as something else, as a friend or maybe more than a friend, was his problem, not hers. Right, he said, forcing his voice to stay light. Well, they are lucky to have you. The rain lasted 3 days. On the 4th morning, Kade woke to silence, the kind of silence that meant something was wrong. He dressed quickly and came downstairs to find Renna at the window, her sword drawn. What is it? He whispered. She pointed. Outside, the yard was full of men, at least a dozen, all armed, forming a loose semicircle around the mill house. That is not good, Kade said. Renna shot him a look that clearly agreed. The front door shook with a heavy knock. Voss, come out. We are not here to hurt you, just want to talk. They always say that, Kade muttered. He raised his voice. What do you want? Baron's given his final offer. Double the last price. You take it and keep your mouth shut at the assizes or things get difficult. Kade looked at Renna. She signed. 12 outside, maybe more around back. What do you think? He asked quietly. She wrote quickly, can fight, will be bloody, you will be target. He knew what she was asking. Was his testimony worth dying for? The truth was, he did not know. Some days it felt like the only important thing he had ever done. Other days it felt like throwing his life away for nothing. The Baron would probably buy his way out anyway. The magistrate was old and tired. The king was far away and did not care about drowned farmers. But then he thought about those 3 farms. The Malens with their 6 children. The Carters, newlyweds barely 20. Old Fen, who had survived 40 years of hard living only to drown in his own bedroom. No, Kade said. Tell them no. Renna looked at him, searching his face. I am seeing this through, Kade said. Whatever it costs. She nodded once, sharp and decisive. Then she moved. It happened so fast Kade barely tracked it. Renna threw open a shutter and put an arrow through the nearest man's thigh before he could shout. She dropped the bow, drew her sword, and was out the door before Kade could draw breath to yell. He grabbed his grandfather's old hunting spear from above the fireplace and followed her out. The yard erupted into chaos. Renna moved like water, flowing around strikes, her sword flashing in the morning light. She fought with an economy of motion that was beautiful and terrible at once. No wasted movement. Every strike purposeful. Kade did his best to guard her back, using the spear's reach to keep men away. He was not a fighter, not really, but he had worked hard all his life and he was strong. He thrust and jabbed, more warning than wounding, and prayed he would not have to actually kill anyone. Then he saw the torch. One of the Baron's men had pulled back from the fight and was lighting a brand from a small lantern. His intention was clear. If they could not bribe or threaten Kade into silence, they would burn him out. "Renna," Kade shouted, pointing. She spun, saw the threat, and started toward the man with the torch. But 3 more men moved to block her, and she was forced to engage. Kade ran. It was stupid and reckless, and he did it anyway, charging across the yard with the spear leveled. The man with the torch saw him coming and grinned, winding up to throw. Kade threw first. The spear flew awkward and wobbly, but it caught the man in the shoulder and he dropped the torch with a scream. Kade grabbed it before it could catch the dry grass, stamping out the flames. Something hit him from behind, hard, and he went down. His head cracked against the ground and the world tilted sideways. He tasted blood. Through the ringing in his ears he heard Renna scream. Not words, just sound, raw and furious. There was a wet thud, another scream, and then she was there, hauling him up, her face tight with something that might have been fear. "I am fine," Kade slurred. "Just give me a second." The remaining Baron's men were retreating, dragging their wounded with them. Renna had blood on her sword and more on her left arm, seeping through her sleeve. "You are hurt," Kade said. She shook her head, but he could see the pain in the set of her jaw. "Inside," he ordered. "Now." They stumbled into the mill house together. Kade's vision kept swimming, but he made it to the table and sat down hard. Renna tried to stay standing, swaying. "Sit," Kade said. "Please." She sat. He fetched water and cloth, his hands shaking. The cut on her arm was long but not deep, a graze from a blade. He cleaned it as gently as he could, and she did not flinch. "I need to stitch it," he said. I am not good at this, but I have done it before. On myself." She nodded. He fetched his sewing kit, the one with the heavy thread he used for canvas repairs. Threaded a needle with hands that would not quite steady. Renna watched him, her breathing controlled. "This is going to hurt," Kade warned. She held out her arm. He worked as carefully as he could, making small, even stitches. Renna sat stone still, her free hand gripping the edge of the table hard enough that her knuckles went pale. When he tied off the thread and sat back, he was sweating. "Done," he said. "You should rest. I will keep watch." Renna shook her head and reached for her slate. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline wearing off. She wrote, "You are concussed. Maybe a little, not little. Pupils uneven. I will be fine. I just need." She stood, grabbed him by the collar, and steered him toward the bedroom. He was too dizzy to argue. She pushed him onto the bed, pulled off his boots, and pointed at him sternly. "Stay." "Yes, madam," Kade mumbled. She left and came back with a wet cloth, pressing it to the lump forming on the back of his head. He hissed at the sting. "You do not have to," he started. She gave him a look that said he should stop talking. So he did. He lay there while she tended him, her touch gentle despite the calluses on her hands. Her face was close to his, close enough that he could see the fine scars on her jaw, the way her tusks curved just slightly upward. She was beautiful, he realized. Not in the conventional way, not in the way the village girls were beautiful, but in the way a sword was beautiful, purposeful, honed, real. "Renna," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "I am going to let you out of the contract." Her whole body went rigid. I cannot ask you to die for my lawsuit, Kade continued. This is only going to get worse. You saw that out there. Next time they will bring more men or burn the mill while we sleep, or I do not know. But I will not be responsible for your death, so consider yourself released. The magistrate can find someone else, or I will go without a guard, or I will just not go at all. Renna stared at him for a long moment. Then she grabbed her slate with shaking hands and wrote, the chalk screeching. No. It is not up for debate, Kade said. I am the client. I can terminate the contract whenever. She threw the slate across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, chalk dust exploding. Kade froze. Renna was breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. She looked furious and hurt and something else he could not name. She stood there, trembling, and he saw her throat work as if she was trying to swallow something down. Then she leaned in close, so close her breath ghosted against his ear, and she whispered, her voice rough and low and the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. I guard you because I want you. The world stopped. Kade could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the warmth of her breath and the weight of those words settling into his chest like stones into a riverbed. Renna pulled back, her eyes wide, as if she could not quite believe what she had just done. Her lips were pressed together and he saw a tear track down her cheek. You spoke, Kade said stupidly. She nodded, another tear falling. The lodge code. You said words breed attachment, she nodded again. And speaking means you lose the contract, you're standing. Yes. She did not write it, just mouthed the word, and he understood. Renna, she stood abruptly and fled. Not out of the house, just into the main room. He heard her pacing, heard something that might have been a sob. Kade tried to stand and immediately regretted it. His head spun and his stomach lurched. He made it upright through sheer stubbornness and staggered to the doorway. Renna was standing by the fireplace, her back to him, her shoulders shaking. Hey, Kade said softly. She did not turn. Renna, look at me, please. Slowly she turned. Her face was wet, her expression raw. I want you too, Kade said. I have wanted you for weeks. I just thought I did not think you could or that you would, or, he laughed a little wild. I am not saying this right. What I mean is I am glad you spoke. I am glad you broke your code. And if that makes me selfish, then I am selfish, but I do not care because he stopped. The words too big, too much. I care about you, so much. More than I have cared about anyone in a long time. Renna closed the distance between them in 3 strides and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate and fierce, tasting of salt and copper and desperation. Her hands cupped his face, careful of his injury, and his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her close. She was warm and solid and real, and he never wanted to let go. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. What happens now? He asked. I do not know, Renna said, and even those 3 words in her voice made his heart race. I have never done this before, kissed someone, spoken to someone I am guarding. Broken code, any of it. Well, Kade said, we will figure it out together, but first we need to deal with the Baron. Renna pulled back, her expression shifting back into something harder, professional. They will come again, soon, with more men. Then we do not wait for them. We go on the offensive. How? I testify. We leave for the assizes tomorrow under cover of night, get ahead of them. Too dangerous. More dangerous than waiting here to be burned out. She hesitated, then shook her head. We need help, cannot fight a dozen men on the road. Who would help us? Renna thought for a moment. My lodge. They will honor the contract until I formally resign. I can send word, ask for backup on the road to the assizes. Will they come if I ask properly? Yes. Then we do that, tonight. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Renner wrote a message in a script Kade could not read, all sharp angles and dots. She gave it to a runner from the village, a boy named Tam who could ride fast and keep his mouth shut, along with a silver coin and instructions to deliver it to the lodge house in Millbrook, 2 days north. Kade packed supplies: food, water, blankets, his testimony papers sealed by the magistrate, a knife because he had thrown his only spear. They did not talk about the kiss. They did not talk about what came after. There was too much to do, and the daylight was burning away too fast. But when evening came and they sat down to a cold supper of bread and cheese, Kade reached across the table and took her hand. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Yes," Renna said. Her voice was still rough, as if she was not used to shaping words. "But not of fighting." "Of what, then?" "Of failing you." Kade squeezed her hand. "You could never." They left at midnight, slipping out the back with their packs and the 2 horses Kade kept for hauling grain. The night was clear and cold, the stars bright overhead. Renna led the way, moving silent as a ghost through the trees. They made good time at first, following the King's Road north toward the assize town of Grenfell. But by dawn, Renna was tense, her head constantly turning. "What is wrong?" Kade asked, being followed. "How many?" 6, maybe 8, staying back. "Do we run or fight?" "Neither." We reach the waypost at Crossing Willows. Defensible position. Force them to wait or attack in daylight. They pushed the horses hard, and by mid-morning they saw the waypost ahead. It was a fortified inn, built to house travelers and withstand bandit attacks. High walls, a strong gate, a well in the courtyard. The gatekeeper took one look at Renna and reached for his cudgel. "She is with me," Kade said quickly. "We are being pursued, Baron Torrance's men. I am a witness for the assizes." The gatekeeper's expression shifted. "That business with the dam?" "Yes." "Get inside. I will bar the gate." They clattered into the courtyard just as riders appeared on the road behind them. 8 men, heavily armed, riding hard. "Bar it," Kade shouted. The gate slammed shut, the heavy bar dropping into place. Outside they could hear the Baron's men shouting, demanding entry. "They will not try anything here," the gatekeeper said. "Waypost is Crown land. Attacking it is a hanging offense." "They might not care," Renna said. Her voice still startled Kade, low and raspy but clear. The gatekeeper jumped. "She talks," he said. "Recently," Kade replied. They waited. The Baron's men circled the waypost twice, then settled in to watch from the tree line. "A siege, then, or a waiting game?" "How long until your lodge members arrive?" Kade asked Renna. 2 days, if they ride fast." "We have food for maybe 3 days if we are careful," the gatekeeper said. "Water is not a problem. We can wait them out." But on the 2nd day, smoke rose from the direction of Crossing Ford. Kade stood on the waypost wall, staring at the dark column against the sky, and felt his heart break. "They burned the mill," he said. Renna came to stand beside him, her hand finding his. "I am sorry. Everything I had, everything my father built, we will rebuild. With what? I have nothing left." "You have testimony, you have truth, that counts for something." Kade wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that truth mattered, that justice would be served, that the Baron would pay for what he had done. But standing there watching his livelihood burn, it was hard to hold on to hope. That night, he lay in the small room the waypost had given them, staring at the ceiling. Renna was beside him, not touching but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "I meant it," she said into the darkness. "About wanting you, I know. I have never wanted anything before. The lodge taught us to be empty, to serve without attachment, but with you I could not. I tried, but I could not." Kade rolled to face her. In the dim light from the window, he could just make out her profile. "What will you do after the assizes?" "Resign from the lodge, forfeit my status. I have already broken code. There is no going back." "I am sorry. I am not." She turned her head to look at him. "I would do it again, 100 times." He kissed her then, soft and slow, and she made a small sound against his mouth. They held each other in the darkness, and for a moment the world outside did not matter. The lodge members arrived on the third day, 5 of them, all orcs, all armed to the teeth. Their leader was a scarred woman named Gritha who looked at Renna with something like disappointment. "You spoke," Gritha said. "It was not a question." "Yes," Renna said. "You know what that means." "Yes." "Then we will discuss it after. For now we honor the contract. The client reaches the assizes safely." "Understood." "Understood." The Baron's men did not stand a chance. The lodge members cut through them like a hot knife through butter, and the survivors fled. By nightfall they were on the road again, the lodge members forming a protective ring around Kade and Renna. Gritha rode beside them for a while, studying Kade. "You are the one she spoke for," Gritha said. "I am. Must be something special." "I am just a miller." "No," Gritha shook her head. "You are the man who made Renna Darrow break a code she has held for 10 years. That is not nothing." They reached Grenfell 4 days later. The assize town was packed, every in full, the streets crawling with petitioners and witnesses and the whole machinery of royal justice. Kade gave his testimony in a stone hall that smelled of old wood and older fear. He told them what he had seen, what he had heard, and he did not leave anything out. Baron Torrance sat in the gallery, his face purple with rage, but he could not touch Kade. Not here. Not under the eyes of the king's magistrate. The verdict came 2 days later. Guilty. The Baron was stripped of his title, his lands forfeit, his fortune divided among the families of the dead. It was not enough, could never be enough, but it was something. Kade stood outside the hall afterward, feeling empty and strange. Renna found him there. "It is done," she said. "Yes." "What now?" "Now I suppose I go back to Crossing Ford and see if there is anything left to salvage." And after that he looked at her. "I was hoping you might have some ideas." She almost smiled. "I need to go to the lodge, formally resign, say my goodbyes. I will come with you." "You do not have to, I want to." So they rode north together, leaving the assize town behind. The lodge hall was deep in the woods, a compound of stone buildings surrounded by training yards. Renna approached it with her spine straight and her head high. The resignation ceremony was brief and painful. Renna knelt before the lodge master, a grizzled orc with more scars than skin, and spoke the words that severed her from the only family she had known. She laid down her lodge cloak, her rank insignia, her contract seal. "You are released," the lodge master said. "Go with honor, Renna Darrow." "You served well." Renna stood, and Kade saw the tears on her face, but she did not look back. They walked out of the lodge hall together, and Kade asked, "Where do you want to go?" "I do not know," Renna said. "I have never had a choice before." "Then let me make a suggestion." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. It was a deed, stamped by the crown magistrate, transferring ownership of a parcel of land on the Sylvirun River, the site where his mill had stood. "I cannot rebuild alone," Kade said, "but with 2 people it might be possible. If one of those people was very strong and good at hitting things with hammers." Renna took the deed, reading it carefully. "This has 2 names." "It does. Kade Voss and Renna Darrow. I had it drawn up after the verdict." "I know it is presumptuous, and if you do not want to, I understand, but I thought maybe—" She kissed him, hard and fierce, and when she pulled back she was smiling. Actually smiling, her tusks catching the light. "Yes," she said. "I want to." They rode south together as autumn deepened into winter. The mill site was a ruin, blackened timbers and ash, but the wheel housing was intact and the river still ran strong. They camped on the bank and planned. Kade drew diagrams in the dirt, showing where the new mill would stand, how the gears would align, where the living quarters would go. Renna listened and asked questions and made suggestions that were often better than his original ideas. The village helped. Old Marcus brought nails and lumber. The Finns donated labor. Even the magistrates sent a purse of coins, compensation from the baron's forfeited estate. It was not charity, they said. It was investment. The valley needed a mill, and Kade had earned their respect. They built through the winter, working when the weather allowed, huddling together when it did not. Renna learned carpentry and masonry, and the 1,000 small skills required to build something from nothing. Kade learned to fight because Renna insisted, and though he would never be a warrior, he could at least defend himself. By spring, the mill was standing. Not finished, but standing. The wheel turned, the gears meshed, and the first sacks of grain ground into flour that smelled like hope. They were eating dinner one night, bowls of stew in their laps, when Renna said, "I want to marry you." Kade nearly choked on a carrot. "What? Marriage? It is a human thing, yes, a bond, a promise." "Yes, but you do not just, I mean, there is usually, I should be the one asking why." "I do not know tradition. I do not care about tradition." She set down her bowl and took his hands. "I want to be bound to you, legally, spiritually, however humans do it. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours." Kade felt his throat tighten. "I want that too." "Then say yes." "Yes. 1,000 times yes." They were married in the spring by a traveling priest who did not blink at the orc bride. The whole village came, and the lodge sent a gift, a set of matched daggers with Renna's name engraved on one and Kade's on the other. They danced badly and ate too much and laughed until their sides hurt, and when the night was over and the guests had gone home, they stood together by the river, watching the wheel turn. "Do you regret any of it?" Kade asked. Then he winced. "Sorry, I know you hate that question." "I do not hate it," Renna said. "I just never know how to answer." She thought for a moment. "No, I do not regret. Leaving the lodge was hard, losing my rank hurt, but I would not trade us for anything. Even when I talk too much, especially then." He grinned and pulled her close. She rested her head on his shoulder, and they stood there in the growing dark, listening to the river and the creak of the wheel and the sound of their own breathing. A year later, Renna told him she was pregnant. Kade promptly fainted, which she found endlessly amusing. Their son was born in the winter, small and squalling and perfect. They named him Eric, and he had his father's brown hair and his mother's amber eyes. 2 years after that, a second son arrived, Ivor, who was quieter and more serious. Then came Della, fierce and stubborn, who climbed everything and feared nothing. The mill prospered. People came from all over the valley to have their grain ground, and some came just to see the orc miller and her human husband, the couple who had defied a baron and built a life out of ashes. They were not always easy years. There were lean winters and hard springs, illnesses and injuries and the normal sorrows of life. But there was also laughter and warmth and the steady, sure knowledge that they had chosen each other and would keep choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. On their 10th anniversary, Kade gave Renna a new slate, bound in leather with her name embossed on the cover. "In case you ever want to go back to not talking," he said, grinning. She threw it at his head, laughing, and chased him into the river. The children shrieked with delight and jumped in after them, and they splashed and played until they were all soaked and shivering. That night, after the children were asleep, Kade and Renna sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "I never thought I would have this," Renna said quietly. "A home, a family, someone who knows me." "I never thought I would find someone who could keep up with me," Kade replied. "But you do. You always have." "Because I want to." He smiled, remembering that night so many years ago when she had whispered those words in the darkness. "I am glad you do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers, and outside the mill wheel turned, steady and sure, grinding grain into flour, water into power, two lives into one. The years continued to unfold, each one adding new layers to their story. Eric grew tall and took after his father, always tinkering with the mill machinery, finding ways to make it run more efficiently. Ivor became the family scholar, learning to read and write in 3 languages, including the angular script of the Orc lodges. Della announced at age 7 that she was going to join the Royal Guard, and no one doubted she would succeed. The village of Crossing Ford changed too. More Orc families settled in the area, drawn by stories of Renna and Kade, proof that a different kind of life was possible. The prejudice did not disappear overnight, but it softened, year by year, as people worked alongside each other and realized that green skin did not make someone a monster. When Kade turned 50, his back finally started to complain about the years of hard labor. Renna, who aged more slowly, still moved with the same fluid grace she had when they met, though her hair had begun to show silver threads. "You are getting old," she teased one morning, watching him wince as he climbed out of bed. "You are just getting started," he replied. "It is not fair." Nothing about us has ever been fair. That is what makes it interesting. Eric took over most of the mill operations, with his father advising. This gave Kade and Renna time to do things they had always talked about but never managed. They traveled to the coast, something neither had seen. They spent a month visiting the lodge where Renna had trained, and Kade met the people who had shaped her into the woman she became. They were welcomed with honor, and Gritha, now the lodge master, told stories of Renna's training days that made Kade laugh until he cried. "She once held a plank position for 4 hours to win a bet," Gritha said, her eyes twinkling. "Never seen such stubbornness." "Oh, I have seen it," Kade assured her. "I live with it." Renna elbowed him, grinning. They returned home to find that Ivor had been accepted to study law in the capital. And Della had indeed joined the regional militia, the first step toward her dream of the Royal Guard. Eric had married a girl from the neighboring village, a carpenter's daughter named Mee, who fit into the family as if she had always been there. The mill house expanded again, adding rooms for the growing family. Grandchildren arrived, noisy and joyful, filling the spaces with laughter. Kade taught them to fish in the river, the same way his father had taught him. Renna taught them to be strong, to stand up for what was right, to never let anyone tell them they were less because of who they were. One evening, 25 years after they had married, Kade and Renna walked down to the river to watch the sunset. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of the day. "You ever think about that night?" Kade asked. "When you first spoke?" "Every day," Renna said. "It was the night my real life began. Mine too." She leaned against him, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They were both older now, marked by time and work and the beautiful weight of the life they had built. But the feeling between them had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by years of choosing each other over and over again. "I love you," Kade said. He said it often, never tiring of the words. "I love you too," Renna replied. She still said it less frequently, but when she did, he felt it all the way to his bones. They stood there as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. The mill wheel turned behind them, its familiar creak a kind of music. Children's voices drifted from the house, Eric calling everyone to dinner. Kade thought about everything that had led to this moment. The dam collapse that had seemed like such a tragedy. The testimony that had nearly cost him his life. The silent bodyguard who had become his entire world. All of it, every hard choice and frightening moment, had been worth it to arrive here. "Ready for supper?" Renna asked. Always, Kade said. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and the door opened to warmth and light and the sound of family. Inside, Eric was carving a roast while me set the table. The grandchildren raced around, playing some elaborate game that made sense only to them. Della was home on leave. Her militia uniform hung carefully by the door. Ivor had sent a letter that arrived that morning, full of news from the capital. They all sat down together, 3 generations around a table that Kade and Renna had built with their own hands. They shared food and stories, teased and laughed, and argued good-naturedly about everything and nothing. Later, after the meal was finished and the children were in bed, after Eric and me had retired to their room, and the house had settled into quiet, Kade and Renna sat by the fireplace in the main room. "This is what I guard now," Renna said softly, gesturing to encompass the house, the sleeping children, the life they had created. "Not just you, all of this." "We guard it together," Kade said. "Yes, together." She rested her head on his shoulder and he pressed a kiss to her hair. The fire crackled, the wheel creaked outside, and somewhere in the distance an owl called to the night. They had built something lasting, something real. Not just a mill, though the mill stood strong. Not just a family, though the family thrived. They had built a testament to the truth that love could cross any divide, that courage could change the world, and that sometimes the most important words were the ones you had to risk everything to speak. Kade Voss and Renna Darrow had started as client and guard, as human and orc, as 2 people from different worlds. But they had become something more, something neither could have imagined in the beginning. They had become home. And as the fire burned low and the night deepened around them, they sat in the peace of that truth, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together. Always together. The mill would keep turning. The river would keep running. The seasons would change and the years would pass. But this, the warmth of her shoulder against his chest, the sound of her breathing, the certainty that he was loved and that he loved in return, this would endure. Not because it was easy. Not because it was ordained by fate or destiny or any grand design. But because they chose it, every single day in 1,000 small ways and a few monumentally brave ones. That was the real story, Kade thought as sleep began to pull at him. Not the drama of the Baron or the burned mill, or even the night Renna first spoke. The real story was all the days after, all the ordinary moments that added up to an extraordinary life. The story of a miller and his orc wife, who built a home by a river and filled it with love. And it was a good story. The best one Kade knew. He closed his eyes, Renna warm and solid beside him, and let the contentment of it all wash over him like water over the mill wheel, steady, sure, unstoppable, home.